I attended Joe Exotic's trial.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hello, 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 and welcome back to the podcast that loves to bring you all kinds of exciting people and animal people, but as of yet, not any people animals, the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, it has been a crazy couple of days for me as I headed back from California to Philadelphia and then up to New England, as I mentioned on Zoo News. Zoe and I were attending the wedding of her best friend from high school, and it was a lot of fun. And I have been doing homework and traveling and working on the podcast, and life is crazy. But really, I just said that before because I wanted to make that funny voice where I go crazy because I'm a goober. And so now you've all heard me do that twice, and that's time you can't get back in life. Sorry about that. Anyway, the rest of this episode, though, is time that you are definitely not going to want back. Today, I am bringing you an interview with not one, but two National Geographic Explorers. Now, I'm guessing that you have heard that term before, but what actually is a Nat Geo Explorer? We know what National Geographic is. We know what explorers are in the sense that they explore things, but if you've ever wondered exactly what it means to become a National Geographic Explorer, you're going to find out in this episode. Steve and Sharon have combined to write a new book, which is all about big cats, and we definitely talk about that book a little bit in this episode. But honestly, I didn't even do a very good job getting to the book because we had too many cool stories to share. Sharon does a ton of really neat work with government agencies and trying to get laws passed and all that kinds of stuff. Steve is an amazing photographer with some really famous photos that we talk about, and I'll make sure to put up links to his page and everything so you can go and see what we're chatting about. And this is just cool. There's a lot of stories about seeing big cats in the wild and what needs to be done for their conservation and safety. Not just in situ, but ex situ, because we are finally getting around to talking about the Big Cat Safety Act that I've mentioned on Zoo News a bunch with some people who actually know what's going on. I'll leave it for the interview, but there's a really good conversation about that and why maybe some of you who have reached out to me and said that you don't support it for certain reasons need to rethink that strategy. I think you're going to enjoy what you hear about the Big Cat Safety Act. We do touch on some Tiger King stuff, of course, only, in a negative way, but it's a good one, y'all. We go into a lot of details on a lot of cool stuff. Also, Steve and Sharon are a couple, and they are adorable together, and you're going to hear some of that, and it is awesome. So we'll get to the interview in a minute. But first of all, I want to remind you to make sure that you hit subscribe, and that way you won't miss any episodes. Also, make sure that you're following along on this little adventure at Rossifari on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and also at Rossifari Pod on TikTok. I also want to hype up the fact that there are some really amazing episodes coming. Y'all, I'm so excited. Starting with this one right here, we are doing a seriously cool run of episodes, and I think they're going to blow your minds a little bit. So make sure that you're caught up, make sure that you're listening, and make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss a single thing. And also, if you would like to support the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. For as little as $3 a month, you'll get some bonus audio from some of the episodes and a couple of other cool features and functions and things. I'm just making up words now. But if you feel like supporting me, making up words like that, then go ahead to that link, or you can also find it in the show notes and become a patron. And I'll love you forever. Literally forever. That's how this works. I am legally obligated to love you forever. All right, enough of my goofiness. Let's get to this interview. So, without further ado, here is the answer to the question of what the heck is a Nat Geo Explorer with Steve Winter and Sharon Guynup. All right, so why don't we start off by the both of you telling me who you are, where you work, and what you do.
My name is Steve Winter. I've been a contract photographer with National Geographic for around 25 years, and I specialize in big cats.
And he's omitting the fact that he's also produced 3 documentary films on big cats.
Oh, yeah.
And
2 books.
And I'm Sharon Guynup. I'm an investigative journalist and producer. I'm also a public policy fellow at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., which is a nonpartisan public policy think tank that is meant to, inform Congress. So we tend to work on big projects, each of us, and we sometimes get the opportunity to work together.
That's really awesome. I love that. And we're here today to talk about your new book that you've put together. Yes. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's called The Ultimate Book of Big Cats, and it covers all the big cats. And my job as a National Geographic photographer is to get pictures that we haven't seen before. Specifically, my editor hasn't seen before, since she's seen about everything in her career. So, and the behavior of the animals. And I'm with them every day for the first trips around 10 weeks long. So you're out in the field every single day. And so that is what the book covers. Everything you want to know about big cats.
And, in our work, we Steve needs to capture, the amazing, beauty of these animals, as well as their kind of secret behaviors that we don't see. But as journalists, we also really want to tell their story, which means, what's it like for the people that share the landscape, with top predators, and what threats face these cats. Most of them are endangered. And, what kind of research is being done by scientists about these animals? And most importantly, what kind of conservation efforts are underway that are really making a difference to save these iconic animals?
And that's all incredible. And I'm really looking forward to diving into that with you both. So, Steve, when you're out in the wild, what is it like? I mean, cats are shy in general. What do you do to, make sure that you aren't seen and that you get good photographs? And how does that work?
Well, time is very, very important, because some of these animals are very shy. And then I need to use technology on those cats, specifically like the snow leopard, cougars, and some of the more secretive cats. I use remote camera traps to get their image, and they're created by the engineers at National Geographic. And with that, I use an infrared beam and a camera and some flashes, and set it up on the trail where the cat may walk. I have to learn how to follow, or to be able to find these animals by their footprints, things like that, and set the camera up and compose it. When the animal breaks the beam in my composition, it takes 10 pictures. That first one is mine. It's the one I set it up for. But other than that, it's time you spend every day out there searching for, whether it's tigers or jaguars or lions or leopards or cheetahs. And you get to know their habits, you get to know the area and the people that you're working with. And eventually we're all out for the same thing. You get those images you haven't seen before. And it sometimes takes weeks or months to get them, but we do.
And, we couldn't do these stories without the help of local people that live beside these
Right.
animals and the scientists that study them. That's how we learn how to find them. That's how we know how to be safe, because let's face it, they are top predators. And although they don't traditionally go after people, some, especially tigers and leopards, can be dangerous. So, we need to do this work in a way that we not only accomplish what we need to, but that we don't get eaten in the process.
Right.
Always a good goal. Always a good goal. Yes.
Yes.
So one thing that I like to do in each interview is get a little bit of the history. Like, how did y'all get to this point? So if you would just both go through what brought you into this world, that would be incredible.
Well, it first started for us. I was with a photo agency, Black Star in New York, and they asked me if I wanted to go down to Costa Rica to work with Merck Pharmaceuticals and the National Biodiversity Institute of Costa Rica, who are looking for new drugs in the rainforest. And so I talked to Sharon about it, and we said, let's all go. Our son came along. We were gone, 6 weeks?
Yeah, our son Nick was five and a half.
Wow.
And I had 8 assignments from the scientific journal Science.
Yeah.
So we traveled all over Costa Rica for 6 weeks. It was our first time ever in the rainforest. We're working with biologists,
Right.
And that was it. From there, Steve had been doing work for National Geographic, but then he became a wildlife photographer at the age of 34?
Yeah, I didn't take my first picture of an animal until that trip. So I was 34 years old then, and switched gears. We needed wildlife people also, so switched gears into wildlife, which was great.
And I began as a photographer, but I did people and culture and news, and the last number of stories I did as a photographer before I went to graduate school and studied science and journalism, the science stories captivated me. So, that's where I made the switch in subject matter. So I then, became a journalist, eventually learned how to become an investigative reporter. And I also, consult on film and TV.
But, when we were doing that, it was, working in the New York area, what I was doing here, and then working with passionate, dedicated scientists in the jungle. Well, when you kind of looked at this one or this one, it was a no-brainer that definitely wanted to work in the natural world. And and tell stories instead of these single picture things that I was doing, and telling stories was vitally important.
I think both of us reached a point in our career where we really wanted to make a difference. We really wanted our work to have impact. And so those have been the kinds of projects that we have increasingly gravitated towards. And Steve's produced 3 films for Nat Geo Wild. We will be doing more films. This is my 3rd book and his 2nd. And we all need to make a difference. And for us, it's with our storytelling and our images.
That's so awesome. And I have to tell you, it's extra inspirational to me because so my day job is that I'm a touring drummer, and I act and I do that kind of thing. That's how I make my living. And it was only, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I've always liked zoos and animals and stuff, but it was only the last, like I said, maybe 7 or 8 years that I started to get into conservation and understanding how important it is and how amazing it is. And realizing that I could use my storytelling ability and even my musical ability in certain ways to reach people for this. And so I launched the podcast, and I'm currently getting a master's in biology and working on science communication skills as much as possible. And everything that y'all are talking about, like the fact that you didn't take a photograph of an animal until your 30s, it means so much to me because I also didn't do that. And now I have like an animal Instagram, and yeah, that's really cool to hear, because sometimes I do feel, I'm not going to lie, I'm in class with a bunch of people that are, 22 years old, and I'm like, oh oh, I'm in trouble.
Well, I started graduate school when I was 39. So I had that exact same experience. For me, I was switching departments. I'd been a photographer. That was the art department. I was switching to editorial, but it was very different skills. And it was launching a new career. And it's been really powerful. I love researching and writing and producing. It's fabulous. And, another really important thing that both Steve and I do is public lectures. Steve does talks for National Geographic Live all over the US and over the world. And I
love it.
I also do a lot of public speaking with the Wilson Center. And what storytelling is, regardless of the medium, whether you're doing a podcast or a multimedia piece or a story or a film or a talk, we all need to educate the public. And from my perspective, some of the work I do, it's also really important to educate policymakers and again, to try to spark change.
We did that on our last story that we did together for the magazine that came out 3 months before Tiger King, but it was on captive tigers in the U.S. And it was a 2-year investigation, and that really helped people understand the situation of the fact that we have more tigers in captivity in the U.S. than there are in the wild.
Oh, and understand that, it's not only a really abusive thing to pull cats from their mothers when they're born so they can be handed around to tourists and then basically disposed of when they're 4 months old and too big to pet. But, there's lots of criminal activity associated with those kinds of, petting zoos, roadside zoos, everything from, nonprofit fraud to, Joe Exotic was, jailed for murder for hire. But there's also a great deal of wildlife trafficking, and many of the workers and owners of those venues have felonies, including drug and gun charges. So it really is a very seedy and abusive activity. And our story was seen by every member of Congress because National Geographic gave a copy of the magazine to each lawmaker when it came out. And the Big Cat Public Safety Act just passed the House and is about to go to the Senate, and that would make it illegal for any kinds of hands-on contact with big cats or for anyone outside of an accredited zoo to breed big cats. And it's being addressed as a public safety issue, which it truly is.
Absolutely. And I am a huge supporter of that act. But I will tell you, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I have many fans who have reached out to me and said that they refuse to support it or to get behind it simply because Carol Baskin is involved. And I get that, she is part of a problematic thing in Tiger King. Just the fact that Tiger King exists is a problem, in my opinion. But it does, and we have to worry about the safety of the animals, not necessarily the names attached to it. In that case.
Well, and humans. I mean, all you need is, a big storm in one of these ramshackle roadside zoos, like blowing down fences. And then, why should local citizens and or, public responders, be placed, in danger? And why should just anybody be able to keep such a large, dangerous animal? That's something that truly should be reserved for, professionals at accredited zoos. So, it shouldn't be a personality issue. I have met and we've spent time with and photographed at all of those venues. I attended Joe Exotic's trial.
Oh my goodness.
I corresponded in jail with Joe for 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the best thing is that the email was smartjailmail.com, which is the best oxymoron ever.
That's entertaining. Wow, that's really I'm so glad that you brought that up and that we were able to share a little more light on that, because I try to talk about it on the pod, but yeah, people will say, yeah, but Carol, but hopefully listening to a couple of experts here, they'll believe me more. So that's very cool. Now I'm curious. The term I believe that is used to describe y'all is Nat Geo Explorers. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct, but you get that title, Nat Geo Explorer, by receiving a grant from the nonprofit National Geographic Society, which was founded in 1888, which is when National Geographic was founded. And without their support and grant support on all my projects, I wouldn't have been able to be a success at them, because it's very difficult for the magazine and to fund some of these large scale projects that I love doing with big cats.
You can't just waltz into the Himalayas and come out with pictures.
Yeah.
Steve camped in the Himalayas for 3 months in the middle of winter, 50 below zero. Had to go in with a whole camp and everything trekked in on horseback. And he never saw those cats. It was all camera traps. That takes a really long time and a lot of funding. So National Geographic Society, funds these large projects. And we're also launching a nonprofit next month called Big Cat Voices. And it's going to be at bigcatvoices.org, again, to fund films and these big projects that, hopefully will continue to further conservation of these iconic animals.
That's just so cool. I love Nat Geo so much. I'm a big fan of looking back at life a little bit and figuring out like where you got where you were going. And, I've certainly seen my fair share of documentaries and such, but also I remember growing up, my grandfather subscribed to Nat Geo. And every time I would use the bathroom at his house when I visited, it was AARP or Nat Geo. So guess what I spent my time reading?
AARP.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And, no, but it's so funny to me that, I didn't even realize I was getting a conservation education. I was mostly looking at pictures and then reading the stories that looked interesting a little bit. And now here I am trying to become a conservationist. And that's, you cannot deny that had to be a part of it,
Both Steve and I had National Geographic in our homes as kids.
Right.
And you mentioned that was your dream, right?
Well, it was my dream. I got my first camera at 7 and I looked at Nat Geo. And when I was 8 years old, I said, just to myself, maybe to my family, I don't remember, when I grow up, I'm going to be a National Geographic photographer. I know a lot of people say that, but, I only really knew how to be a photographer. So I'm very lucky that I was able to realize my dream.
That is wonderful. And as I was the same way with music, honestly. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a drummer. And they're like, okay. And now I'm a drummer. So yeah, it's really cool when you get to do the thing, that you said. That's very cool.
Right, exactly.
But enough of this human crap. Let's talk about some animals, because this is an animal podcast after all. So I am so curious to hear just what some of your experiences have been like as far as getting some of these photographs. Tell me about like 1 or 2 big cats that you've gotten photographs of, and tell me the story behind it. All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Kathy Hill from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're all about restoration projects in progress this season on One Lagoon, One Voice. Learn about the great strides the lagoon community is taking to restore and protect the Indian River Lagoon. Each week, we dive deep into discussions with scientists, resource managers, and nonprofit leaders to explore lagoon issues and solutions. From oyster reefs to clam restoration, algae blooms to muck, you'll learn all about the projects we're tackling to bring the Indian River Lagoon back to health. Click the link in the show notes to follow One Lagoon, One Voice, learn about the IRL Council, and explore our unique lagoon.
Well, My first big cat story was on jaguars. And it was the second time I was ever really scared by a big cat. And the first time was on my first natural history story, which was on the sacred bird of the Maya and the Aztecs, the Quetzal. I was in a cloud forest in Guatemala. And as I would walk back up to the one-room shack in which I was staying, all of a sudden the hair on the back of my head would stand up in my arms, and I had no idea what was going on. I eventually would turn around some days and look, but I didn't see anything on the trail. But you don't see anything in a cloud forest or a rainforest because you can't see the trail except for about maybe 6 feet behind you because it's full of plants. And one night I'm laying in bed reading my book, and I hear the stairs creaking, then the floorboards creaking, and then scratching, and then sniffing under the door. All the hair of my whole body stood up. And I grabbed the walkie-talkie to call the naturalist I was working with, who lived down right at the base of the mountain. And I told him what was going on, and he's in Spanish. He said, "Steve, don't worry, it's just a black panther." And I'm like, "Hold it, come on, Carlos. I've been here 5 weeks, and you didn't tell me I was living with a black panther." And he said, "Well, we didn't want to worry you." And then my next story was jaguars. And I failed in the beginning by trying to use these remote cameras because the cats are really smart and they do what they want. And so I knew I had to see them face to face. Got an email from a Brazilian scientist that said, "I found a place you could see jaguars, but you have to come because I'm only going to be in Brazil for 2 more weeks." So I went down to see him and started working in Brazil and found a place where you could actually see the cats.
And, we just got back from there.
Yeah.
And, Steve has now done, numerous stories there. I have as well.
TV show there with Bertie Gregory.
So the Pantanal is the world's largest inland wetlands. And during the dry season, the waters go down anywhere from 9 to 12 feet. And then, then there's navigable rivers, and jaguars come down to the banks to hunt. Oh. So, we were just, down there for about 10 days. And, in that amount of time, we had 15 jaguar sightings, including a jaguar jumping off a bank to kill a caiman and drag it back up to go off and eat it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, the reason that we saw so many jaguars this time is a result of Steve's first of 2 jaguar stories. He discovered that most of the jaguars that were being killed by ranchers. It's largely privately owned ranch land, and they blame jaguars for every cow they lost. Steve managed to get funding for a scientist to radio color some cats, then track them on a laptop, and could prove to ranchers that there were cats nowhere near where that cow died. And in the meantime, it also got out in his story that you could see jaguars there, and it launched an ecotourism initiative. And many, many fewer cats get killed by ranchers now because they're worth money to local people. And there are so many more jaguars than the first time that I went there, which was 2009. Steve first went there, 1997?
97, yeah. And you would see just glimpses of these cats, except one. Somebody said, "Hey, you want to go to the ranch where Teddy Roosevelt hunted jaguars back in 1913? And I said, "Sure, but why?" And they said, "The biggest cat we've ever seen starts hunting at dusk." So we went out in the pickup truck. After about 20 minutes, I see something on the road, just a dirt road on the ranch. Well, we went out and started walking behind it. After about 20 minutes, I looked to the guy that was with me and said, "Sergio, where'd he go?" And the cat's 12 feet away in the grass looking at me. I started walking towards us, try to get its eyes through the blades of grass, was taking pictures until the guy with me, Sergio, said, "Steve, get back. His ears are out. That means he's ready to jump." I stepped back, but got the opener of the first ever jaguar story in National Geographic. But I was so scared. The camera was shaking. I couldn't breathe. It was my first really being scared around big cats.
But back then, again, they were much harder to see.
Yeah.
They were afraid of people because they were hunted all the time. Now they just hang out on the banks. They go on about what they're doing, hunting in front of us, even though we're there in a boat. And I think, one part of that story that's really important is that people that live with apex predators, there's a cost, right? I mean, big cats are occasionally going to kill livestock. And depending on how large an operation you have, that could be a huge financial hit for a family. So,
right.
Successful conservation relies on making an economically viable solution that helps local people protect the animals that they live behind. And in this case, ecotourism has been very successful and it's working. And, there's other stories we've worked on. Some of the things that you did with snow leopards, for example, right?
Right. Well, in snow leopards, it was the same thing that, these predators will kill livestock and then they want to kill them. Just to finish the Brazil story, that first scientific project found that only 1% of cattle deaths could be attributed to jaguars. And now in 2017, a Brazilian scientist did a PhD paper and said that each cow is worth $2,000 in its lifetime, but each jaguar brings in $108,000 every year in ecotourism income. So nobody's killing the jaguars in that touristed area where a lot of the ranches have turned into ecotourism lodges. On snow leopards, it was the same thing. Give people a reason they have to benefit from living with predators. So help them build predator-proof corrals. They have a lot of rocks, but chain link fence over those rocks means that no predator can get inside. And then I found most of these villages weren't even vaccinating their animals for hoof and mouth disease, so they were losing like 30% of their herd to disease every year. I got the vaccine from USAID in Delhi. I hired a vet, brought him in, started a program with a local nonprofit. And then as long as the people promised not to kill snow leopards, they would get their herds vaccinated. In the end, they're getting 30% more money in their pocket every year. And they hated snow leopards. Now they love them because they're making a lot more money.
I love these stories so much. That is so awesome. Wow, that's so cool.
Transfer that kind of stuff to other big cats.
Right. Yeah. And to any conservation really out there, I think, that's, I'm not going to lie. When I started to get into conservation, I only cared about the animal side of it. And it has been such a journey to learn that obviously you need to protect habitats, but you also need to take care of these humans. And that, unfortunately, in my opinion, I think we should all value nature for nature's sake. But we live in a world and money matters and feeding your family matters. And learning that has been really, I think, important for me and a bit of a challenge, if I'm being honest. I think we should save snow leopards because they're snow leopards, but I totally understand that I don't live with snow leopards and I'm not thinking that they're killing my, cattle and making my family starve, whether they are or not. If I think it, it's a problem. So that is so cool to hear these stories in action. And it's also so cool that y'all came from a, non-scientific background and through art, we're able to make this happen using science. I am wildly inspired by you both right now. That's
thank you.
Absolutely. Now, I do have to ask something, though. First of all, you two are adorable together. For those listening, you guys are looking at each other. You're like pointing at each other who to say what. It's very cute. And you mentioned a child. So how did you two meet, and how did this become like more than just a professional thing, or was it personal and then you became professional partners? How did this work out?
Well, we were both interns for a series of workshops that Magnum photographers held in New York. Steve was a photo assistant to Nick Nichols, who,
Nick Nichols
became, one of the world's, most famous
Premier.
wildlife photographers. Yeah. And I was working in the picture library part-time at Magnum, which is, a photographer-owned cooperative, some of the best photographers in the world. And so we were both, interns for these workshops. We met there. I was married at the time. Some years later, I got divorced. I had a son. He was quite young. And Steve and I got together, and, Steve became Nick's stepdad. We've now been together more than 30 years. And Nick went on many of those trips with us. So he was seeing, all these things at the same time as we were first seeing them. And it's very poignant for us that we've been able to dedicate this book to his daughter, our granddaughter, Winter Rose Rugia, and to Nick, because, again, many of these images were made with Nick along. So, he is incredibly knowledgeable about wildlife and ecosystems as well. And it was a family adventure.
That's so cool.
Very
I
much
love that.
so. Yeah.
I love that so much. It's interesting because we all talk about like influencing the next generation. And clearly y'all did that. And that's so cool. I try with my son, Miles. He's already met his first red panda, which is kind of my favorite species that I'm looking out for. And we'll go to a zoo or something and some kid will be like, oh, look at that red panda. I want one as a pet. And Miles will go, excuse me. They're actually not good pets. And here are the reasons why. And I'm like, oh, kid, I love you so much.
That's great.
Well, it shows what education does, right? We can teach kids to recycle. We can teach them to respect wildlife. We can teach them to care about the environment and, care about each other, right? I mean, we can teach empathy and compassion and teach kids to make smart choices and to speak up.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
What if I told you scientists discovered 100 new species in the deep ocean?
Why did crocodiles survive extinction?
Megalodon. How did it go extinct?
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You might know me from Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive and Shark Week. Join me and my friends as we dive into the wild world of animal anomalies and everything wildlife. Don't miss out. Click here to uncover these mind-blowing animal mysteries.
Absolutely. And boy, we need all of that right now in this world. We will get to the book, but I have one more kind of goofy question for y'all first. So you've been out there and you have seen all the things. But what is the number one animal for each of you that you wish you could see, in the wild? If there was one thing that you haven't seen yet, if there are any animals you haven't seen yet. I know there are like 5 million species out there, but y'all have been doing it. But what is the one thing?
Well, my next story is the Asiatic lions in India. And I always pick stories that have very unique behaviors that are caused by humans in many instances. So I'm really looking forward to that because, tell you the truth, I've seen so many things. I can't think of something that I haven't seen that I really want to see.
You haven't seen these?
I haven't seen these, though. So as far as big cats go, I'm looking forward to see the Asiatic lion.
I haven't seen them either.
Because there's only 700 left.
Oof.
And they're only found in India, very Western India and Gujarat.
They used to go all the way to the Mediterranean,
right.
Like all the, Roman lions, all of that. They were Asiatic lions. Right. So there's only, one group of them left.
All the gladiator lions, the biblical lions, all that kind of stuff that went all the way to the Mediterranean. Now
and for me, I think there's two. I've always wanted to see a clouded leopard. They're really rare and really elusive. I'd also really like to see birds of paradise.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool. All right. So let's talk about the book for a little bit. Why did y'all decide to make this book?
Well, Nat Geo came to us and asked us to do it.
Right.
That's a darn good reason. I'm just putting this out there
Yeah.
into the world. If Nat Geo ever came to me and asked me to do anything, I would do it. So yeah, I get that.
But also, education is really important to us. I years ago, for 3 years, I managed and taught an Artists and Writers in the Schools project here in Hoboken. Steve and I have done, lectures and gone into classrooms, and education is really, really important. So we were thrilled at the idea of being able to share, these amazing photographs and lots of really interesting information, with kids. And, from what we hear, parents are also captivated.
I love, since I've gotten into doing some of these book interviews and such, especially, and have gotten books sent to me, I'm going to give them all to my son eventually, but they're amazing. Like, there's so much good info, and the photos are always incredible. And I thoroughly enjoy all of these books. I think more than Miles does right now, although as he gets older, he enjoys them more as well.
I'm sure. And, it's great to have some of the, important stories from each one of these cats, at the end of certain chapters, with a nice big double page image of the cat with the story behind the image, which is very important, because many of these were extremely difficult to get. And I was very, very lucky, but always staying positive that I would get them. And so those stories are fun.
Yeah, no, that's
one thing about
awesome.
Steve is that Steve is relentless. He spends months and months and months in the field. Again, really tough conditions, leeches, bugs, disease, heat, cold, humidity, it's not all of it is glamorous, and day in and day out, no days off ever. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication, and even if weeks and weeks and weeks go by and he's not getting the pictures that he needs, he always stays positive. He's like, tomorrow's another day and onward. Now I'd be having a nervous breakdown. It's like, oh my God, I got this assignment and I haven't gotten what I need yet. But he hangs in there and he always gets the images.
That's such an important lesson, and that's so cool. I respect the heck out of that. I can't even imagine. I mean, is it even 1% of the amount of time that you're out in the field that you're actually seeing the animals and possibly getting images, or you say it's less than that?
No, it's more than that. I mean, especially with big cats, you can find them, and we call them flat cats. They're just lying there sleeping for hours and hours
during the day, especially.
So we may see them, but then we'll move on to try to find an active cat that's very hungry, that is moving, and we may come back to the flat cats because you never know when they might wake up. But
it totally depends on the species. Doing that snow leopard story, 3 months in the field, he glimpsed one that was so far away that with his longest lens, it was a dot. The rest was all camera trap images. Yeah. So his time seeing them was essentially zero.
Right.
But, tigers, you see them a lot. You spend a lot of time. Lions are, as soon as you find a pride, they're there and they're in front of you. So it really varies dramatically by the species.
That's really cool. How do you stay safe in the field? Because these are all protected contact animals in zoos, but I'm guessing you're not setting up fences.
No, I think to me, people ask me, how did you learn how to do this? And to me, it's scientists and local people. And in the end, it's more local people because they don't leave, because they live there. And so you follow their lead. When you're working in a park, you're working with a guide and, a Jeep driver and all that. And you find out who's media savvy, and you work with them, and you follow what they do, and you never deviate from it because your safety is at stake. because we're already walking in all these locations, because I always do set up remote cameras to try to get these intimate views that you would never, ever get because you couldn't be that close to an animal. At low level, eye to eye with the cat, and set those up. So you have to go set them up, then check them. And they're working 24/7. And so that's very important. But it you are out there and it is dangerous. So you just watch what's going on. I mean, that said, but the first time I set the camera trap up in tigers, I went and looked at the guards that were protecting us, and 2 of them were asleep, and we knew there were 5 tigers close by.
Absolutely amazing. So tell me some of the species that are featured in the book that you're excited to educate kids, but really everyone about, because, we all know lions, we all know tigers, but what are you excited to help make kids more excited about?
Oh, it's, all 5 species of big cats are covered, right? But, there's also one chapter on the smaller cats. And, they too are often the top predators in their ecosystems. And some of them are really beautiful, like clouded leopards. Some are very funny looking, like the Pallas cat.
Yeah.
But, I don't think people realize how many small cats there are. We're also really excited to include some history and mythology in there. The cats were sacred to the Egyptians. They were part of the family. There's been a lot of mythology around tigers and lions, the Nemean lion, right? So it's very interesting to put these big animals in a cultural and historical context, and also look at the people that live with them, and especially the scientists and conservationists that are studying and protecting them. So, we tell the whole story. It's animal, but it's also human, because humans are impacting every corner of the planet.
Oh, yeah. And that's why we need conservation, folks.
Right.
Sad but true. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really, this is so cool. I'm so fascinated by, like I said, the juxtaposition of art and science that y'all represent. It gives me a lot of hope for things I want to do, and for the people out there who aren't necessarily very sciencey, at least at the start of things, but can learn and can get inspired to learn. I think that's really important. What is your favorite ever moment, out in the wild, and for you, Steve? And then for you, I want to know, what is the biggest impact that you've had, policy wise, that you're the proudest of?
Good, Steve.
Well, it would be hard to say I had a favorite moment, because they're all based around success, either in getting an image or making a difference. Getting the image is vital, especially ones that my editor is just blown away by because they've never seen it before. But making a difference is just so very important, because there's going to be a future for that animal in that area, and then hopefully it spreads out, wider for the whole species of that cat, and starts a conversation that, well, we can do this. And
so which images? If you pick 1 or 2.
Well, obviously the cover of our tiger book, Nat Geo Tiger book, of the mom and cub, is one, that it was only 5 frames that I got. And I didn't get it, for the first 5.5 months I was there, because the females with cubs were killed the first week I was there. So, obviously snow leopards changed my life, because Sharon entered the images. I was already in the field on the next story, and she entered the images in BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And I won 5 categories and the honor of being called BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And I just never entered a contest, because I knew I'd already won. Wanted to be a Nat Geo photographer since I was 8 years old. So we have snow leopards, we have tigers. I love the picture of the leopard in the tree at night because it's something that we just don't see. We pass it by because, it's nighttime. Well, guess what? Some of these cats are still walking around. Many of them are sleeping because cats sleep 20 to 22 hours a day. But I've been just dying to do more work at night of these animals with the better sensors on these cameras. We're able to do it in an easier way.
So for listeners, that image, there's a leopard up in a tree. It's in Africa, in South Africa.
The tree has no leaves.
Nice.
So, shine a spotlight on the cat. Cats don't care.
A flash.
And then, camera on a tripod. So like a number of second exposure, to bring up the stars, and then, flash on the cat illuminates the cat. So it's, this cat under a canopy of, amazing stars. So
and of course the Hollywood cougar came from here. I actually visualized the picture because I had to get something to do urban cats, and I was failing in the Bay Area. And so I went down to LA, and I had seen that image in my mind's eye, because when you're doing camera traps, you kind of know what you're going to get, because you have a certain frame. You see what the background is of your area. And obviously I wanted the Hollywood sign in it, so I knew what the background was. I just needed the cat walking on the trail in the foreground. And, it wasn't there when I first talked to the scientist about it. 8 months later it was. And 15 months of putting cameras all over the 9 square miles of Griffith Park. 15 months later, I got the photograph, and it just influenced people and gave them hope. Because people would go, why are they so excited about a cat in a park where they all visit? And at first they're very worried about the fact that there's a mountain lion in a park that has 24 million visitors every year. But only like 6 people have ever seen P22 in 10 years. But the photograph did quite a bit.
So, a number of projects that we have been involved in, even if I'm not working directly with Steve, I sometimes may end up doing, offshoot stories or, work on these cats in other ways. And, the P22 example is really poignant, because that cat was in Griffith Park, and Steve's pictures of P22 made him a celebrity. Everybody in Southern California knows this cat. P22, Brad Pitt, it's like a household name. And, the National Wildlife Federation, Beth Pratt, ended up carrying around a life-size image of P22, one of Steve's pictures that he donated. She walked around for 9 years trying to, influence lawmakers. And on Earth Day this past year, they broke ground on what will be the largest wildlife overpass in the world across the 101, right, a little bit north of LA. And, the reason it's necessary is because, the area is, crisscrossed with freeways, and 2 of the, largest remaining protected areas are bisected by these freeways. And it's not just, cougars that are getting hit. It's deer, it's, all the animals, and, that endangers humans driving, sure, but it also is really impacting these animals. So, this work can make a difference. And, the power of photography is notorious. Look at the images throughout history that people have seen that spark change, be it political, social, environmental. So yeah, P22, he's our favorite. He's our favorite cougar.
But it's something like P22, but then the U.S. Tiger Story also did a lot. But we want to do more things that have a tangible end to them, that we can make a difference with these projects. And that's what's important to us. And to tell you the truth, it has been from the beginning, because people ask me, why are you working with scientists to try to figure this thing out about, jaguars killing all the cows. And I said, well, I spent too much time on it to just walk away from something that ridiculous. And my best friend was the Brazilian scientist boss. And I said, hey, Alan, you should do a first GPS sat college study and find the answer to this problem. And we did.
So Alan Rabinowitz was a renowned, big cat biologist, and Steve, and I worked very, very closely, with him for years. And that study is what proved that, jaguars weren't responsible for every dead cow, and it completely changed the trajectory of conservation in that region.
And I do believe that we have a responsibility to do things like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is absolutely wonderful. So let me ask you both, where are some places that people could find not just your latest book, but your work in general?
Many of my stories, not all of them, are on my website, which is sharonguynup.com. You can also Google me. Steve has a website, stevewinterphoto.com. As of October 10th, bigcatvoices.org website will be up.
And you can see a lot of my big cat pictures there.
Nice.
And learn a lot about what we're doing.
And also, on Big Cat Voices, we'll have like an ongoing, Twitter and Instagram feed, and there'll be images and videos of us working in the field, and look at the projects that are current.
And go to my Instagram, Steve Winter Photo.
Absolutely. Very cool. And I think it is time for... It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Well, one of the grossest things that ever happened to me, that to me just is a nuisance. But when you tell people about it, they go, I have to lay down to put these camera traps up. And when you're in swamps, you may pick up some nasty little things. And I'll never forget when I looked one day at my belly button and saw underneath it something under the skin going around and around my belly button. They were called larvae migrants, and it was small little worms moving around underneath my skin. I had bot flies, on my elbows, on the top of my thumbs, and the top of my head. And we got those worms out. But those are a couple worm stories. But I have a lot of stories that my editor's like, I don't want to hear anymore.
So bot flies in Latin America, they lay their eggs inside skin, and then their larvae hatch and climb out. So that's pretty disgusting. For me, I don't have as gross stories, but I do find leeches really horrific. They're not only pretty gross looking, but once you get them off, they have an anticoagulant in their saliva. So, you're just kind of like streaming blood, and you just feel like, it's a monster movie or something.
Wonderful. Lovely. Oh man. Well, thank you both so much for doing this. And best of luck with the book and everything that y'all have coming up. I'm very excited to see and to be in your world now. This is going to be cool.
Thanks, John.
Thanks
for having us.
Thank you so much for making the time for us today.
All right, y'all. So here's the deal. That was an incredible interview. Those two are amazing. I could do an entire month on those. We didn't even get to the films and such. There's so much cool stuff going on there. But I want to go see big cats in the wild now. I know you're shocked. I'm going to remind you all to go check out. It's going to be live soon. bigcatvoices.org. But also Sharon and Steve have a bunch of different ways to check out their various undertakings and photography and all the cool work that they're doing. So I'm just going to put all of those links in the show notes, because me yelling a bunch of URLs at you right now won't be particularly helpful. So I'm not going to do it. But go check those show notes and go check these two out and support them and love on the work that they are doing, because it is incredible, inspirational work. All right. I want to take a minute to say thank you to my Red Panda level patron, Laura Shank. You rock, Laura. And also to all of my patrons, including my new patron, Carol Wentz. Hi, Carol. Welcome to the family. I am so grateful to have you here and hope that you are enjoying all of the bonus audio that you can be checking out right now. All right, y'all. I have a dog coming at me who clearly wants some pets, and so I am going to end this episode and go pay attention to a dog. But first, remember, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Vesley Gross. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.